Hey, webinar listeners, thanks for joining us. We ran into a little bit of technical difficulties, but we made it. Sorry for being a couple minutes late. So with that said, Kimberly, hi, how are you? Nice to see you again.
Hello. Yeah, excited to be here. Excited to start a new Shop Talk series for insurance. We're going to be doing this on the second Shop Talk of every month for the next few months. Definitely excited to share and have guest speakers such as Rob with a ton of industry knowledge and really redefine what Matterport is for the insurance space.
That's awesome. And Rob Harrell, can you, hi, first of all, and thanks for joining us very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Amir. Thank you, Kimberly.
And can you tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're coming to us from?
Yeah, basically, I've been in the industry, excuse me, for about 24 years. Most of that is on the carrier side. My career throughout the insurance side, I started out as a desk adjuster, went to a field adjuster, went to a manager. Then I went into training. So most of my kind of passion within the industry is training people to use most of the industry ecosystem tools and the efficiency behind those tools.
Awesome. Can't wait to dive in and see what we've got here. So I'll go ahead and just kind of click through the slides. You let me know when to move forward.
To preface this, Matterport's been working hand in hand with ATI for a few months now to really deep dive into some of our data and some of the efficiencies around it in the industry, working with a direct correlation into some of our carriers as well, really to get a good understanding of how the ecosystem is going to be using Matterport and how this saves you time in the field, both from a carrier perspective and from a contractor perspective. And Rob has been gracious enough to be at the forefront of all of this, walking into it. And part of the case study that we're going to hear about today is a real deep dive into the recent Polar Vortex that we had in Texas.
So, Kimberly, you're exactly right. So when we talk about this latest Polar Vortex, or let's just talk about CAT in general for a second. So it doesn't matter what portion of the insurance restoration ecosystem you are, whether you're an independent adjuster, a staff adjuster, a restoration contractor, doesn't matter where you are. The number one need when you get into a CAT, at least in my opinion, is time and the capacity to get back time. Everyone's so busy, you're under a great deal of pressure. So one of the things we wanted to examine in the latest CAT was what type of capacity, what type of time did the tools such as Matterport provide? And what we did in this recent Polar Vortex, we wanted to look at how much time could we get back, but I wanted to just kind of briefly show on this slide the amount of the event, because a lot of people just say, yeah, it was a cold snap, came through Texas, but to put this in perspective, this is some information from one of the large estimating software systems out. There were 717,661 claims reported in this incident. To put that in perspective, Hurricane Harvey only had 500,000 claims. So this was actually a larger event in Texas than Hurricane Harvey was. So what we really focused on with our Matterport, or the use of the Matterport tool, was we kind of honed in on 4 types of structures, mostly with those being around commercial buildings. So we utilize this on large hotel and conference centers, office buildings, and multifamily dwellings. Multifamily dwellings, just very common apartments, very common condominiums. And then for the residential side, we focused more on affluent properties. And what I mean by that is these were any structures that were over $1 million.
So Rob, what would be great is maybe if you could walk through kind of how you guys situated yourself from a CAT perspective and how you set yourself up for success walking into it, both operationally and how you kind of organize maybe large multifamily units and some of your hotels and maybe some suggestions for the rest of the industry on how to proceed from an organizational standpoint.
Yeah, great question, Kimberly. Well, just like every organization right now, everyone has safety at the top of mind. So one of the things we knew going into these types of events was we wanted to maintain social distancing and safety for everyone, especially during this time of COVID. Hopefully coming to the end of COVID and relaxing of some of those safety precautions, which we did see in Texas. But again, as you mentioned, we were dealing with a lot of property management firms that had board members. They had different tenants throughout the units. So there was a lot more interest in the actual what was going on, and there was no better way to show what was going on, what the severity of damage was, how many units were impacted, than actually showing them with a Matterport scan. So one of the things we did learn is that when you go into an event like this, organization is key. What I mean by organization is, in a few slides, we'll show how we decided to organize some of these, but some complexities to let everyone know about, especially when you're dealing with whether it's a hotel or any type of structure where there's multitudes of families or different occupants, is you have to give awareness to the tenants. They have to know you're coming so you don't surprise them. So getting in touch with the property management team and letting them know, hey, we're going to be out here on this day between this time to scan, and then having access to the unit. So with one of the hotels we're going to look at, they really just wanted us to focus in on working on the weekdays versus the weekends because they were so busy. And then the second part of this was any unit that we were dealing with in the multifamily that had deadbolts, which the facilities outlawed, but people still had deadbolts. We couldn't get in. So that made it a little bit difficult as well. And how we kind of structured or prioritized the Matterport scanning was the percentage of demolition that had been completed. We found it to be much greater. The Matterport scan had a much more significance if the demolition had been completed in that room or rooms.
So I think the next couple of slides, you're really going to kind of walk us through some of your processes and operationally how you guys were setting these up for success internally. So let's go ahead and jump right in and talk a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks, Kimberly. And you're exactly correct. So the first thing that we did was we had to establish a communication flow with our frontline project directors. So what we did internally for that is we created a shared spreadsheet on a Google Drive. Then for that, what we did was we asked a series of questions. And what those questions were to the project directors is we asked them, what was the access to the units, meaning who was going to give us access to the units, who the point of contact for the project was from the material interested party side, and then the percentage of demolition completed. Now, one of the individuals at ATI actually came up with a brilliant idea. They said, hey, let's put whether the date we started the scan, when we finished it, and more importantly, were we ordering a TruePlan or were we ordering a schematic? And then we were putting in when that was coming in. So that's what you see here on this diagram. This is just an example of the shared schedule that we use.
So my understanding is a lot of the feedback that we've received from local restoration companies is when we have these large buildings or these large multifamily tenants, how do we give access to maybe our property management companies or our adjuster at a quick glance without having them set up their own account? So if you can walk us through how you've done that, that would be great.
Yeah, so we were trying to make this. So one of the things we were trying to really be cognizant of is this was a very stressful ordeal for a lot of these property management individuals and board members because they had a lot of their tenants that were, I would say, in a state of shock and or could be angry, could be any type of different emotions. We tried to lessen that burden of having them go in and set up their own account by just giving them access to the link. So what we did here, what you're seeing on the screen is, we just set up a system where we took each one of the individual scans, put them on a spreadsheet, and then shared these, organized them by project directors, sent these lists out to the project directors who could then just copy and paste this into an email. And then that way, anyone that got this email was able to just access the link for whatever unit they want in a very, or I would say organized way, but you could just look and say, hey, if I need to go into unit 713, I just click right here, takes them right there. But one of the things that was a major impactful tool for us was emphasizing privacy concerns. So we did make sure that we blurred everyone's face because the number one question we would get asked from the tenants is they would all try to run and hide from the camera. And they would say, I don't want my face shown. So a number of times we explained to people that, don't worry, we do blur all the faces so no one's faces get seen. So.
Okay, the next slide really just kind of covers how ATI specifically sets up some of these CATS events. I thought it would be helpful for Rob to kind of discuss a little bit more about how internally utilizing our Matterport platform, they organize their system.
So yeah, this was another key feature because we had, I think there were over 300, 400 individual scans. And so we kept all of those scans in a folder that has, so the first thing we were putting was ATI, just if we had to communicate with Matterport, they knew our organization. Then our next kind of name in the naming convention there, you'll see a D5B, that's our Salesforce job number. Then the next item we would put there is just the name of the project. And then the following thing would be whether it was pre-mitigation, post-mitigation, or post-repair. Obviously, we haven't hit post-repair in these, but we would label them accordingly to where we were at in the process. This is the part that I'm probably the most passionate about right here, Kimberly, is just the unbelievable ability to get back time. So I wanted to just show this quickly. So anyone who does a lot of sketching in Xactimate, they understand a lot of the intricacies here. So there were multiple tray ceilings. So even though you're not seeing it here, there were over 8 tray ceilings in just this photo alone. Tray ceilings are a nightmare to kind of sketch, but then to tie in some of these arch rails and walls, the pillars, this particular, I think this was 57 feet to the top of this, to the top of the ceiling from the floor in this main lobby. But this was a large hotel, 400 plus room hotel that we did. And this particular project manager had about 10 jobs that were very similar to this. So just wanted to show some of this before we kind of go into the actual scan so we can talk about some things we did, some of the tips and tricks that we'll cover, but just wanted to talk about some of the intricacies here that people might understand doing a lot of sketching in Xactimate.
Let's go ahead and do a deeper dive, Rob, into some of the data that you found behind this particular model.
Yeah, so I don't mean to jump around on this slide, but again, I am obsessed with trying to find the fastest, best, most accurate way to do things. Again, doesn't matter what side you're on. Being an Xactimate trainer, I'm always looking at how can I make this a better product? How can I make the industry better? So we did a prior study where we looked at, where basically we looked at how long does it take to sketch the average 373 square foot room. If you wonder why we went with that square footage, it was basically, we wanted to take a look at 2 rooms and a bathroom. So we focused in on that. What we found is to sketch that kind of portion, and the reason why we went with that, that's the average property loss in the United States. So we learned that if you use a laser tape and you sketch it on site, whether you're using Xact Mobile or a laptop, it takes about 21 minutes to sketch that. If you're using a conventional tape measure, it takes about 24 minutes. And we do have that as a white paper if you want to share that with everyone afterwards. But we started using that as our benchmark. And then just to give you some stats about how long this particular, this large 400 room hotel took, we figured out we were gaining about 71.223 square feet per minute we were able to scan. This project was 29,914 square feet. So it took us about 7 total hours to scan this project. And then if we use our prior study to look at how long this would have taken us to sketch, it would have taken approximately 28 hours, 46 minutes had we had used the laser tape, or about 32 hours and 58 minutes if we used the tape measure. Now, if you compare that to an average day, it would have taken about 3 days, 4 hours, and 58 minutes. I can tell you from being, hopefully, calling myself one, a power user within Xactimate, it would have probably taken me about 3 days to really dial this in with all that intricacy. So when we look at this, we were able to save this project record, 3 days, 4 hours, 58 minutes on just this project. But again, he had 10 projects of a similar nature. So we were able to give him back 32 days, 1 hour, and 40 minutes of his life that he didn't have to spend sketching by the use of TruePlan, which to me, that is the most mind-blowing stat I've seen. So just what TruePlan can do for someone from a time capacity in CAT is unbelievable.
Okay, so we have a couple of questions, and I think that we have an example. one of the questions asked is, while you're capturing the hotel, are you using a Pro 2 camera? Because your scans are pretty clean.
Yes, we were. We were using a Pro 2, a Pro Series 2 camera, excuse me. Yes, we were. Basically, we had the tripod set up at 4 feet. So we like to keep it at 4 feet. That's kind of the standard that everyone likes to have. And that's what we do, because if we keep it at 4 feet on a commercial, we're getting a good, these were 9-foot ceilings, so we're getting a good mix of everything versus 3 feet. We're getting a little bit higher, cleaner scan.
And then we did have another question that asked for some context. Were we documenting damage after the fact? So for the non-insurance people that are on here, I think a great use case for Matterport, especially during insurance claims that happens, is after the damage happens. So there's a couple different entry points for Matterport during an insurance cycle. One is when the policy is first getting written. So that way a carrier can understand the risk and assess the potential damage if for some reason something happens to your property. The second entry point that Matterport has in the insurance industry life cycle is after damage occurs. So whether that's fire, flood, a CAT, so a catastrophe event that happens, some sort of natural disaster, Matterport's there to kind of document the process of damage, of the miss of the repairs. So after we mitigate the damage and take out everything that's damaged and begin the rebuild process, it kind of helps us in insurance kind of support that estimate. And then after everything's put back together and everything's in place, we get a good documentation of what kind of the life cycle or the process was as it was going through, and can kind of help secure things like material warranties, and get a good documentation of what that property is in its now current existing state once it's completed. So I think, Rob, it'd be good to give us a little bit of some of your tips and tricks during CAT as you were capturing. I know that you guys did a ton of captures during this CAT and kind of ongoing with Matterport. It'd be good to kind of learn from some of your mistakes and some of the tips and tricks that you've learned in the field.
Yeah, so one of the things that our project directors really liked was the ability to use the measurement tool. So let me give you just a quick example. We had a couple different uses. So we had some cabinets we were looking at. We needed to know the height of the cabinet. Well, in Dallas-Fort Worth, one of the things that people don't consider is just the drive time to get to the loss location. Again, regardless of who you are. We were able to conduct a Zoom meeting, use the measurement tool, figure out exactly what we needed for the takeoff, but then further that point, we were able to send it to a subcontractor. That subcontractor was able to get most of the specs he needed without even making a site visit. What does that mean? Faster cycle time, faster repairs. So that just using that one tool that helped out in 3 different instances. Another thing is we talked about with privacy concerns, even though we have the ability to blur the faces, and I don't want to overstep my bounds because this isn't my ground. So I'm gonna let you and Amir talk to it. But the blur tool that just came out of beta, or it might still be in beta, I don't know, I don't want to misspeak, but we were able to use the blur tool. So like the mats that said the Westin, we were able to go in and blur those out, or whatever any name was, we were able to go blur out whatever that was. So those were major. One other thing, Kevin Bessler asked a question I want to talk about. Is we were able to, the third point here is if we wanted to hone in on something, we were just using the shortcut, the hotkey shortcut of Control U. So that would be our starting point, and we could put that right into an Xactimate estimate under an F9 note. We could put in that tiny URL, and it would take anyone that was any material interested party right to where we wanted them in the scan. But Kevin, to your point, you asked, this is a large scan, did we use one level? We used, and unfortunately I wasn't able to show it, but what we did is on the elevator, we put all the different levels and all the different floors. And so like on the actual elevator itself, we put matter tags that are arranged like buttons on an elevator. So you could go quickly to any level, any specific area of damage. We had a couple rooms on there that sustained larger damage, but we used that elevator to kind of transition through the levels because that's kind of the most natural transition thing. So great question, Kevin, but that's how we did it.
So another great point to that when you're talking about the elevator buttons is we've had some some of our restoration companies say, well, wait a second, I go into a large high-rise, sky-rise building or something like that, and I have multiple different people capturing for time and efficiency kind of coming into it. And so what is the best use case for me to do that? I'll answer part of it. I'm sure Rob will kind of piggyback to it, but some of the things, say it's a 6-story building. One of the things that we've suggested is assign different people on your team to capture. So maybe somebody's capturing floors 1 and 2, and somebody's capturing floors 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. And then those people that are capturing and using April tags to not confuse long hallways or bigger spaces, it'll kind of help with your model processing a little faster. If you need to order assets like your TruePlan, you can do this much faster because we're not hitting our space limitations on square footage at that point. But using those Matter tags and deep linking in those other floors is a great connector point to be able to do that. Which brings me to a really good point. Rob, can you talk about when you're trying to look at ordering your TruePlan, how you would necessarily do that from a cost-effective standpoint in a high-rise building, and some of the efficiencies that you've found from this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one example we had about 80 units that were impacted. Now, of those 80 units, this particular multifamily housing, they had basically 4 layouts. So you had layout A, B, C, and D. So in a situation like that, we found it to be much more cost effective to just order one of the actual floor plans for each one. So A, B, C, and D. So you're ordering 4. And then we would just utilize those, copy and paste them as applicable or as needed. So that was a real efficiency tool for us being able to get that.
Also got another question of, are you using any industry standard colors for information on Matter tags?
I'm aware of the industry standards being Matterport certified, but in this particular case, we did not use the Matter tags because we were not documenting dry standards or anything else of that nature under this. So I'm aware of them, but we did not use them.
So we'll get into some Q&A in just a few minutes, but I definitely want to cover, for those of you who are industry specific on here, we're going to start covering a lot more insurance shop talks as I spoke. So our next insurance shop talk we're going to do is on 4/21. We'd love for you to join us on it. We're going to have our special guest, Seth Harrison with Actionable Insights, who also does our AIMC certification training within Matterport. We're going to talk a lot more about manual blur and how we use it. And then we're going to talk about carriers and during our carriers, kind of how the industry is charging for Matterport, how to help recoup some of those Matterport costs, and really how to work best with your carriers and your adjusters moving forward with Matterport.
All right. Awesome. That was good. Thank you very much. I'll just cover a couple things here that are generic, and we do this in every shop talk. So if you haven't been with us before and you have any kind of support related questions, if you go to Matterport.com, look at the resources tab, the first thing in that menu is support. That'll take you to kind of like the support hub where you'll find frequently asked questions, link to our help center with hundreds of articles, best practices on scanning, as well as how to reach support using the phone number. If you're in the US is down here below, 408-805-3347. You can always email us at support@matterport.com. There's also a little help bubbles that you can chat with support, during office hours. And that too is on that support page. And finally, always make sure that your content or your contact information, your email that's in your account is up to date. We've had the unfortunate incidences where, we send these emails to contacts and then they come back and say, I never got an email. So very, very important. Always make sure that your contact information is up to date in your account. And that's about it. You can stay connected with everything related to Matterport at facebook.com/Matterport. We're always posting on there. And if you've got some, really awesome models that you would like to share, more than happy to check them out and put them in our gallery. So go to go.matterport.com /nominate-your-space to do so. And with that, I believe that's the last. Yep, that's it. So great, good times. Let's go into the Q&A. So we've got some questions.
Sure. So we've got one from Thomas, and actually, Amir, I will let you take this one. How do I get manual blur activated?
Okay. Yeah, great question. I was going to jump in there with Rob, but I wanted to get to this part here. So manual blur. If you're the account admin, you just go into settings in the top right underneath your name, go to manage, scroll down to the very bottom. You shall see the blur brush right there, and you just need to activate it. So once it's activated, then you'll see the little kind of water drop icon in the tool palette when you go and edit your model. So it's available to everybody. It's still technically in beta, but it is an open beta. So by all means, go check it out.
It's awesome. Very easy to use, Amir. And exactly like you said, you just go in, slide the radio button over, and it's right there at the bottom. So it's perfect. It's awesome. And
we have actually a video on exactly how to use it. If you go to our YouTube page, youtube.com/Matterport, you just search through our content for blur brush, and you'll find it'll show you exactly what to do and how to use it.
So we've got a question in here. I'm actually going to change it around just a little bit. Rob, what is the benefit that you're finding kind of working with Matterport and the insurance carriers on this? And how is it that you guys are selling or opening up those discussions with Matterport with the carriers direct?
So interestingly enough, the Matterport scan we did the case study on, that had a large consulting firm on it. They truly see the value of it. So that was the cost for not only our time to scan it, but also for the TruePlan, they picked up the cost of that. That being said, one of the things we did notice out there was, again, just the ability to have a lot of these large loss adjusters have the capacity of time. We were able to go capture capture the damages for them, send them the links, and then coordinate with them if they wanted us to order a schematic and or a TruePlan. And a lot of times we were able to, they're now starting to see the value. The best thing, the easiest way I can compare it, Kimberly, would be in a time of catastrophe. This is very eerily similar to how aerial imagery was 10 years ago, where a lot of the insurance carriers were reluctant to pay for aerial imagery. It's now commonplace to start with an insurance carrier paying for that because they see the efficiency of time it gives back. And we're definitely seeing that now.
Oh, what's one of the largest models that you've captured with Matterport, and why would you or wouldn't you suggest it that way?
Trying to think about the largest. We've captured a heck of a lot of large ones. I think the largest one we did was right about 80 to 90,000 square feet. The complexities with that, as many of the experienced users know, that when you start getting up around 20,000, you kind of want to make breaking points, specifically if that breaking point is going to be needed on an individual basis. But the largest one we did was basically a stadium, and we did use quite a bit of April tags in that. So, again, that's where the experience of starting to be a user and know what the limitations of the camera are. Not that there's limitations in the camera, it's limitations in the space of how you're using the admin tool.
Perfect. We have one that says, how does one break into restoration business or an insurance carrier? I'm assuming from a capture standpoint with Matterport, because that's kind of our audience here. So I would tell you that I definitely would not be approaching a carrier direct. If you're interested first capturing for a carrier, you can definitely join our capture service team and look at it that way. For sure, during a CAT event, when we have a catastrophe that happens, approaching some of your local restoration companies is probably a good tool, because people like ATI, and please don't flood Rob's inbox with a ton of things, but different restoration companies out there, if they're not having a lot of people be able to have access to a Matterport, could potentially outsource this. A good majority of the restoration industry at this point has Matterport cameras and are using this on an everyday use case already. So they would be using you for maybe something like a special project, or a really large capture, or even just some demos on the field. But I definitely would suggest reaching out to our capture service team if you're looking to capture in this space.
There were a couple of questions that I just wanted to kind of cover. Mike asked, Blur, is it available to everybody at any level of accounts? So first thing to note, only the admin can turn it on. Collaborators in your account can't go into their account settings and turn it on. Second thing is almost every account except for the free accounts. So if you're using any level from starter and up, you do have access to the Blur brush. And then there was another question here regarding scanning a large space using multiple cameras to kind of reduce the amount of time, and then stitching those together. Not really recommended because stitching is not really a supported feature. It doesn't always work, so I wouldn't use that as a strategy for scanning a space. You're probably best off with really large spaces to just break it up into a couple models, with my experience. I don't know about you, Rob, what do you have with that?
I follow the same model, which is if I can keep it all on one camera and not have to stitch those, that's what I prefer. Exactly to your point, Amir, of some of the challenges we've seen. And just very quickly off the subject, Greg, I apologize. We had used some acronyms earlier that were unfamiliar to some of the guests. So the question was asked, what is ATI? That means American Technologies Incorporated. That's the name of the organization I work for. And then we were also using an acronym called CAT. That is just shortened for catastrophe. So CAT just means catastrophe. ATI is American Technologies Incorporated. Not my apologies, Greg. Sorry, Mayor. Sorry, Kimberly. Go ahead.
We have one on here that says, how do you answer the client question regarding not owning the model and the concerns that Matterport still has to be in business in order to use the model? Could be years before the model's needed. In a good majority of our insurance ecosystem, our carriers already have SaaS plans. So in that case, a couple of the things that they're looking for is for you to make a copy of that model and send them the model. We're definitely going to do a much deeper dive next Shop Talk for insurance that we have. We're going to talk all about if a carrier is going to be paying for your Matterport, what it is that they're expecting when you go to charge for them, what kind of cameras they're using. Definitely, the expectations behind it from the carrier standpoint. So we'll definitely do a deeper dive into that in the coming month that happens. But especially with some of our new plans, I know that with Matterport, we've got some of our old timers that have been with us from the beginning. You guys have classic plans. It's a little bit of a different scenario, but for our industry, when it comes to insurance on our newer plans, the best benefit to having Matterport at that point is the archive feature. So at that point, even if you're not using a model and you have no business in accessing that capture for 3-5 years until there's a subsequent claim on it, or a cat comes in and you have reoccurring damage on that property. The nice part about archiving is it can just sit there in the cloud for the next 3-5 years without anybody ever having to touch it. And when a secondary claim comes in, then we can take it out of the cloud and we have the last existence of what that pure property documentation looks like from a claims perspective. So that's a good one.
Yeah, Kimberly, can I just add to that real quick?
Sure.
So under most states, they're looking for, most Department of Insurance state that they want 7 years of availability after a claim has been filed. The only difference to that is Pennsylvania, which is 10 years. What we were able to do is exactly what you said, Kimberly. There was one client, insurance specific, a large carrier, that we went out and captured the scan, and we just gave them access or we actually gave them the scan. They were able to upload it on their company server. They can have that as long as they need to.
We have a special question asking, when will Xact be available in Europe? I tried to download the Xactimate demo, but there's no possibility to import a TruePlan. So for a little backstory on that, Xactimate or Verisk, who's the parent company, typically that's directed by the insurance carrier. So each carrier has their own program to use, but outside of the US, there's a ton of different programs that can be used that isn't necessarily Xact directly. They can use Symbility, or sometimes they just kind of do it old school. So just depending on where you're at in the globe, kind of comes into that. But Xact is more of a carrier directed. So this particular carrier uses Xact to communicate, is the recognized portal for that carrier. And at that point, that's when you would be able to download Xact, and then there's profile issues and things that come behind it. So hopefully that helps. How do we contact Capture Service Team? I would suggest going to matterport.com. On there, it can directly link you into Capture Services, and then you can sign up to be a vendor on our website. We have another one that says statutory requirements 7 to 10 years. Absolutely, especially depending on your carrier, depending on your state. You need to keep that Matterport data for an extended period of time, especially, different TPAs. They have their own requirements that kind of come into it, which is why the archive feature for our particular industry is next level. Definitely something that was being asked for a long time before we could even approach this industry. Will Matterport be creating a solution for Symbility? Hey, good news, we already have one. Schematic floor plans work perfect with Symbility, and you don't have to do anything with it. So I definitely would check out the schematic floor plans, but it's literally just a matter of a simple upload and you're done.
Andre's asked, what about non-contiguous areas and how to make them into the same file and kind of incorporate them in the same model? So that definitely is a little bit more complicated. It kind of depends on how far apart they are from one another. You could, scan a path of aligned positions from one to the next if they're relatively close. If they're, like a big hotel room and you've got a room here and then another room up on the 10th floor, that's probably not going to happen, and you're best off just having two separate models. And then depending on what your use case is and what you need those scans for, there is the option of using a 360 capture instead of a 3D scan. There you're just going to get a panorama so you can see it. It'll be incorporated as part of the overall model data, but it won't be 3D data. So just keep that in mind. You won't be able to measure 360 views or 360 captures like you do a 3D scan. A couple different options.
We do have one question on here. Is there a way to change the wall thickness of the underlay to match the common wall thickness in Xact? Those are settings in Xact. You can go in and you can change those after the TruePlan is completed. So you can manually do that if for some reason it doesn't fall into standard guidelines. Okay, someone said carriers are using Matterport for non-claim work for writing policies. Is this true? Yes, we are writing for underwriting and risk at this point for policy assessment. Typically, most of the use cases that we're seeing at this point are high valued claims that are coming in, complex, high risk property, commercial claims that are coming in. In addition to that, definitely, high fire hazard areas, different use cases that carriers know there's a pretty good probability that we're going to have some sort of a claim at this point. I only have one carrier at this point that's recognizing it as like an everyday, every single claim kind of coming in from an underwriting perspective. But we're getting there. So hold tight with us. 2021 is going to be an exciting insurance ride for us for sure.
Andre asked how to transfer models. So Rob, I'm not sure how you did in your case, but basically it's not that you can transfer the Matterport model or something like that. Well, okay, so hang on. The Matterport model itself can't really be transferred to somebody else's server. What your client can do, or insurance or whoever, they can set up their own account, even a free account, and the Matterport model can be transferred to that. That being said, I think what Rob is referring to is downloadable assets. The actual matter pack that has the point cloud, the OBJ files, those can be transferred over. Things like the TruePlan file, that can be transferred over.
So carriers are looking for two different ways, right? If a carrier has a Matterport SaaS account already, so if they already have a plan with us, what they're looking from their restoration contractors is a copy of that digital twin. So this means when you're out and you're capturing, they want you to either upload the model twice So you have two existing models and one of them is getting transferred. So you still have your model, you can mark it up, you can matter tag it, you can measure it, and you still have that asset there. But the carrier also has it for them, so they can use it for their own use case, re-inspections, checking out your estimate, and then they can archive it for the future so they have that if they need it, and you're not responsible for hosting it at that point. The second way to do it, if a carrier does not have a Matterport account, is that's when you can share the model. So you can do that one of three ways. You can add them as a collaborator if you have the users, but I would watch it because we've got a lot of claims and a lot of adjusters. The second way is you can just share the link with them, or because it's an insurance carrier and we're always worried about personal information, I would share the link, but I would password protect it. So anybody who happens to get access to that, or if you're adding it into Xactanalysis in the notes tab to have a link there, that way anybody who's on the claim can access that file, can take a look at it, but you just kind of added that extra layer of protection. Again, we're going to jump into all of this on our next session for Shop Talks for Insurance on the 21st.
First, I believe.
Yeah.
There's a question.
I do know you guys, I'm sorry, Amir.
No, go ahead.
I do know you guys have a good friend of mine, Seth Harrison from Actionable Insights. He'll be on there. And he goes into a lot of in-depth about scansion and what that is, him and Mark Watley. So again, a lot of great information. You guys will enjoy Seth. He's awesome. So
another question came in regarding shortened URLs. You can use a URL shortener, obviously. Does Matterport have any kind of plans to create a URL shortener? Outside of the URL shortener that we put together for the deep link, something that Rob brought up, you just press the little U key on the keyboard and you get a deep link directly to a specific location, like exactly what you're looking at when you press the U key. We got that shortened, but shorter than that, I don't see that happening anytime soon. So you're still really best off with a third party like Bitly or something like that.
Is Matterport GDPR compliant? Yes, we are. How do I know that? Because I had to sit through all of those legal contracts discussions and making sure that we were compliant. So the answer to that is yes, we absolutely are GDPR compliant. Can we send the link for the next webinar? It will be on the video. All of the attendees who have registered for this, Amir will be sending out the recording of this so everybody can have it. In addition to that, you also can find our shop talks on matterport.com and see what the topics are, who's joining, what Amir will be covering every single week on our website.
Yeah, if you go to matterport.com and in that resources tab that I mentioned before, not only do you have support, but you also have events and webinars, and you'll see the Shop Talk series in there. It's got the link to all of them. Kimberly, Rob, first, thank you very much for participating. Did you have like anything else, Kimberly, that you can think of, that popular questions that we may not have covered in this session?
Yeah, so definitely one of the biggest things that I think that people completely ignore sometimes in restoration, that I get a ton of from both carriers and contractors, is our Control U feature. If you're not familiar with it, when you're trying to get a sub bid on a particular room, or maybe a countertop or a window, or just see if somebody can handle something complex from your subcontractors, inside the Matterport, when you're sending over just a random link, it takes you to your starting point. Oftentimes in insurance, when we're trying to point something out to maybe a TPA or to the insurance adjuster about a specific request, a specific line item, something that maybe somebody missed, go into it in your Matterport model, find exactly what it is that you're trying to point out to them or ask for the sub bid for. Say it's a bathtub or a window. Focus right on that bathtub or window. Inside your Matterport, on your keyboard, hit Control U. It will give you a short link to it, and you can send that short link. So what will happen is, when the person on the opposite side goes to open up your link, it will go from a dollhouse view and walk you directly to the area that you're trying to point out. So definitely one of the strongest features and most underutilized feature in our industry.
Yeah, deep links are critical. And we were talking about other ways to kind of be a little bit more efficient with navigating models earlier. So I'm a huge fan of shortcuts and quick keys and things like that, rather than moving the mouse to click on buttons. I find it to just be much, much faster. So one way, just a quick tip to go from one floor to the next, if you're on a multi-story model, is the letters F and R. R will just move you to the closest model, that closest scan position that's on the floor above you. F will move you to the closest scan position that's on the floor below you.
And just one quick thing, I believe I gave Kimberly misinformation. It's not control U. I just went and checked it. It's just hitting the term U. Amir, you said that earlier. I don't want to confuse anyone. I use it all the time. It's an unbelievable feature to be able to put that right in an F9 note. So Kimberly, I probably misguided you, man, and I apologize. It's just you. You don't have to hit the control button. So sorry about that, Kimberly.
Rob, there's a question here. How did you get so incredibly knowledgeable with Matterport?
I have to thank my friends over at Action. Well, I've just started out using it, very curiosity driven. But as far as using the camera, I think everyone would agree it's pretty easy to use. The complexity to me falls back on like the admin and the different tools we're talking about here, such as Xcansion, such as using the tiny URLs, integrating that with Xactimate. A lot of that I really took away from the Matterport certification that Actionable Insight does, both Seth Harrison and Mark Watley. And again, it's a community. And what I mean by community is Kimberly's always been amazing. Amir, you've been amazing. Everyone there. So if there's different ways to learn things, I think we're always looking at how can we be more efficient. But thank you, whoever said that, for that was a great compliment. But that's how I did it, just using it and going to Actionable Insights and just a lot of curiosity around the product. So thank you for that question.
Another question regarding what we were just talking about, shortcut keys. If you just go to support.matterport.com, search for keyboard shortcuts, you'll find them all. Will my blur edits in beta carry over when it goes live? Yes, absolutely. So one thing to note about these blur edits, that at this time, two things. One is they're destructive. So the blur tool, when you apply that blur that you just added, it goes into the panos in your model and it blurs it out. You can't go back without actually reprocessing all the model data. And if you've just spent a lot of time on matter tags and whatnot and highlight reels, you don't want to do that. So be careful. The other thing is it's in its current state where it's, in a development process, right? So this is version 1. The only thing that is right now blurred are the 2D panos themselves, not the 3D data. The underlying dollhouse is not blurred. So if it's a huge sign on the side of a building that you want blurred out, the pano will be blurred. But if you allow your visitors to see the dollhouse, they will be able to kind of back out, see the 3D, and with a large enough sign, they'll be able to make it out, even though it's, the dollhouses are generally a little bit more blurry than the panos. So two things to keep in mind. In future versions, the dollhouse will also be blurred. So looking forward to that. And we may even be able to unblur specific panos, but I don't know yet. So for now, destructive, keep in mind. And with that said, we are at the top of the hour. So a huge thank you to both Kimberly and Rob for joining us today and sharing the knowledge that Matterport has to do with insurance carriers and companies and all that goes on with insurance. Really appreciate your time and efforts.
Thank you very much, Amir and Kimberly. Thank you, guys.
All right. And with that, hope to see you in the next insurance shop talk. That'll be in 1 month, as Kimberly said, on the 21st of April. So looking forward to that. And that's it. So have a great rest of your day. And, again, appreciate your attendance. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.